Welcome to episode 10 of Celtic Sagas and Lore. I am your host, Martin von Watkin. Now in this episode I'd like to cover one of the lesser known, interesting Celtic kings. This one is of Wales and his name is Maelgwn. Now he's a very interesting character, he's very complex and is a mix of historical person and mythological record. Now, he's an interesting character as he has the promise of a King Arthur, the wisdom of Solomon, but then gets a bit rogue and bad and ends up a sort of a King John come Caligula type character with a bit of King Canute thrown in for good measure. Now, King Maelgwn was the son of Caladwyn Lahir ab Union Irth, and he was one of his sons. He was never actually destined to be king, as sort of one of the minor princes, so he just dedicated his life at the time to study in the monasteries in Maelgwn, which is in the south of Wales. Now, in his late teens, King Caladwyn Lahir ab Union Irth died, and Union, who was one of the druids of his court, went to Maelgwn and said, look, it's time for you to take up kingship. You are the best character, but there are 5 of you in total that have a claim to the throne of Gwynedd. Now, myself and the other druids, although druids is not mentioned in the historical records because they were written down doing the Christian things, our old friend, the Christian Edit again. But you can learn about that in previous episodes. Now, the 5 contenders were told to bring their entourages and themselves to Ynys beach in northwest Wales at a set time and date. And the 5 turned up with their entourages and were told by the elders of the court, right, your task for the next 3 hours is to build the finest throne you can, and then after 3 hours we will give you the second part of the challenge to declare who shall be king. So 4 of the princes quickly mobilised their entourages to build them the finest chairs from oak and jewels and gold inlay and all the rest of it, basically a quick as possible throne. Maelgwn said the same, but Eon said to him, no, hang on a minute, go in, send your men into the dunes and gather reeds. So trusting Eon, Maelgwn decided to do this, so they constructed a chair of reeds, which was to the great amusement of the other 4 princes. Now, after the 3 hours was up, the spokesman of the Council of Elders said, right, take your chairs to the beach below the tide line and sit in them. So all 5 princes did so. Obviously, as the tide came in, the levels wrote these chairs of gold and finest oak and that either toppled into the sand or sunk, and the prince had to swim back to shore, where Maelgwn's chair floated. So then he was declared king of Gwynedd, and he ruled wisely and longly for many years. Then he decided to take a wife. Now, at the time, the fairest maiden in the land was a princess called Nest. Now, she was of great beauty and they were married, and from the beginning were quite happy. But this is where Maelgwn starts to get a bit rogue. And Nest became very unhappy, and one of her few salvations and respites was to go down to the shore and play in the rock pools. So one day she was at the rock pools. She saw one interesting one, and she was looking in the rock pool, and she had a ring that was presented to her on her wedding day, which was a great jewelled ring presented to her of the great queens of the north. And the ring slipped off her finger and fell into the pond. In vain she searched for it and was beside herself with fear what would happen to her. So she decided to go to St. Aspin and said to him, look, I really need your help. So she explained the story to St. Aspin, and she And he said, look, don't worry, these things happen, it was an accident. I shall invite you both to dinner, and you shall explain the situation to him. So they did at the meal, and in front of everyone, Maelgwn became enraged and called Nest an outright liar, and just basically being an arsehole. But Saint Aspin turned and said, look, Your Majesty, relax, it's a ring, it's not the thing. So he turned and vented his rage on Saint Aspin as well, which was bishop at the time. So Saint Aspin prayed to the Christian God for aid. Now, the centrepiece of the feast was a giant salmon that had been caught. The salmon was brought out and presented to the fuming king, and it was cut open, and there inside the fish was the ring, proving that Nest was not a liar. So he apologised to both Nest and Maelgwn, and all was right for a while. But again, his arrogance and downright evil started to vent itself as well. Now, Maelgwn at one time fell in lust with the wife of his uncle, and he had Nest killed along with his uncle Owain Danwyn. And he could see from this, obviously he started to get paranoid, and the old King John thing, and obviously due to his arrogance, his funds started to become low, so he decided on a plot. Now, another saint steps into the story here called Padarn, and he said to him, can you do me a favour? I have these golds, sacks of gold, will you look after them for me? Of course, Your Majesty, said Saint Padarn. So, but the sacks of inverted commas gold was filled with moss and stones, and they were placed in the keeping of Padarn at his monastery. But then after a few days, Maelgwn turned up and said to him, okay, I need that gold now. So they went down to the treasury, and obviously there was no gold, just rocks. So he accused Padarn of being a thief and a liar. Now, at the time, there was a thing called trial of ordeal, where basically if you were accused of a crime, an ordeal was put upon you, and if you passed the trial, then you were obviously innocent. Now, obviously these trials were trial by fire, where your hands were burnt, and if they healed within a day, obviously it was the Christian God's will that you were innocent. But as you can imagine, it was no more than a scam to get away. So Padarn's trial was to place his hands in a boiling cauldron and told, leave them in there and then pull them out, and if they are healed, then obviously you are innocent. So St. Padarn placed his hands into the boiling water, and when he pulled out, they were obviously untouched. But again, Maelgwn, with his rage, said it was some trickery and had St. Padarn put to death. Now, obviously this was alienating him more, and around the year 547, the Black Plague came to Wales from Europe, and thousands died. And Maelgwn, this fueled his paranoia more, and he ended up alone and died alone and unloved. Now, obviously that is an interesting story, but I use that story in Celtic law. Now, Celtic law can help us, although it's wise, and it can actually be used today. Now, in my work as a spiritual advisor, I mainly use the tarot and other things. I have many clientele that are in a very controlling relationship. I tell obviously the full version of the story of Nest to Maelgwn, and asking, can you relate to that yourselves? Are you acting or not being yourself be due to what is commonly known as a control freak? How do these person treat you? Are you a liar? Are you this or whatever? So Celtic law, and that's just one example. You can use these stories to help you in your everyday life. Can you relate to Nest, or are you a Maelgwn? These are stories that can be used. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you've liked the Facebook page or subscribed to the site, thank you very much. If not, I'd be very grateful, and if you could share the page or the YouTube channel, again, I'll be very grateful. You can message me direct at www.martin-the-druid.webs.com. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you in episode 11.